I found a giant Zulu chained in the desert. Upon releasing it, I discovered that I had made a mistake. The snowfield opened below the pines like a bare, white wound. Eric saw it as he broke through the last stand of spruce, breath tearing at his lungs, axe heavy in his hand. The light had gone flat with late afternoon, sky pressed low and gray, the kind that promised more snow by nightfall. His beard was crusted with frost where his sweat had frozen. He had been looking for a stray moray from camp, a sorrel that spooked at shadows and had slipped her halter at noon. The foreman had cursed and pointed at the tree line. Eric had taken his axe, pulled up his collar, and walked into the cold. Now, in the hollow between two low ridges, the snow lay strangely disturbed. Tracks circled in wide loops, half drifted like something enormous had paced for hours. Lines cut through the surface where chains had dragged. In the center, black against all that white, a post rose from the ground, thick and raw, wood torn where someone had hammered iron into it. At first he thought it was some old tie-up post for horses, left from autumn work. Then the shape beside it moved. It shifted with a slow, stiff heaviness, as if every muscle had frozen and now cracked trying to obey. Eric stopped at the rim of the hollow, one boot sliding a little on packed crust. His gloved fingers tightened around the axe handle. The figure was kneeling, broad shoulders hunched against the wind, head bowed, back roped with muscle under a torn wool coat. Snow clung to the hair, to the ragged blanket thrown over the shoulders, to the metal that circled throat and wrists. Chains ran from collar to post, from wrists to rings hammered into the wood, all silver gray beneath rime. Then the head lifted. The face was narrow and strong, jaw set, cheekbones high, lips split by cold. Her skin was dark, deep as river mud, darker than any he had seen this far north, chapped at mouth and knuckles. Her eyes were what stopped him. They were black in that gray light and very, very awake. He realized then that she was huge, even kneeling. Her shoulders almost reached his belt line from where he stood above. Her hands were larger than his by half, fingers thick from work, cords of tendon hard under cracked skin. If she stood, she would tower over him easily. Something about the way she held herself made the space around her feel smaller. His heart thumped hard in his chest, a slow, heavy beat. "Who's there?" she called, voice roughened by cold and thirst. The words came with an accent, vowels rounded, clipped in places, but clear. "Just me," he answered, surprised at how small his own voice sounded. "Eric, from the North Camp." Her gaze slid up to meet his fully. It moved over his coat, his boots, the axe, the line of his jaw, the color of his eyes. He had the strange feeling of being weighed on some inner scale. "You work for them," she said. "For the men with guns." Her breath rose in white plumes. Iron bit into the skin at her throat when she swallowed. "I work the saws," he replied. "I swing an axe. That's all." Snow hissed softly across the hollow, driven by a thin wind that cut through wool and into bones. He could hear the creak of distant trees rubbing together, the occasional sharp crack of something freezing and breaking. The world felt narrowed to the circle of trampled snow around that post. He came down the slope slowly, keeping his feet under him, feeling the crust give and crunch. Each step seemed too loud. The chains rattled when she shifted to watch him approach. Up close, she was even larger. The coat she wore had once been someone's good wool, striped faintly in red and black, now stained with pitch and dirt and blood. The sleeves were too short. Her wrists jutted past frayed cuffs, shackles gleaming against skin rubbed raw. Her hands trembled slightly as she clenched them. "You're freezing," he said. The words felt stupid in his mouth. "Yes," she said. "I noticed. There was a dry edge there, buried under exhaustion." It startled him. He had not expected humor in this place. He stood 2 paces from her, axe hanging loose now, breath coming slower. The iron collar around her neck was bolted shut, thick and rusting. A short length of chain ran from collar to a heavy ring in the post. Longer chains fell from wrist shackles, fastened tight, no slack for comfort. "Who did this?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing against a gust of stray snow. "Your brothers," she said. "White coats, red faces. The big one with the belly, he laughs. The thin one smells of whiskey." Her lips pressed together briefly. "They call him Foreman." The description fit too many men he knew. He felt the first small crack in his breath, the beginning of anger edged with unease. He had known the camps were cruel. He had seen men beaten, paid late, sent into blizzards for punishment. But this was different. This was deliberate and careful, built to last. "How long?" he asked. "Dot." She looked up at the sky as if counting days written in clouds. "Snow came 2, 3 times," she said slowly. "Sun rose, set. I stopped counting when fingers went numb." She flexed those big hands, chains scraping. "They bring food, little. Throw it. Some freezes before I chew." He saw the bones scattered behind the post, half buried in drift. A crust of bread lay nearby, stiff as bark, untouched. The Mari he had been sent for was forgotten. "What did they say you did?" he asked Dot. Her eyes flicked over his face again, searching for something. Trust, maybe. Or weakness. "What did they tell you?" She countered. "Nothing," he said. "No one mentioned a woman chained in the snow." "A woman," she repeated softly. Her mouth twisted faintly. "A curiosity. A problem." Her shoulders rose a fraction, then dropped. "I broke a man's arm. He beat a boy because he fell. I said enough. He raised his whip. I stopped him." Her gaze went distant for a moment. "He screamed like a pig. Then the others came." Eric pictured it with painful clarity. He had seen too many boys in camp whose hands shook too much for the crosscut, whose backs were already scarred. He could see a foreman's whip, could hear the meaty crack of it. He could see this woman's hand closing over a man's wrist, could hear bones snapping. "They dragged me," she said. "Tied rope around my neck like animal. I broke the first rope." There was no pride in her voice, only memory. The second held. "They laughed and said, 'We will see if the snow can tame you.'" His stomach turned slowly. "Why chain you here?" He whispered. "Why not send you south to town?" "They wanted to watch," she said. "To come and see if I was begging yet." Something colder came into her eyes then. "I do not beg." The wind surged briefly, swirling snow between them. It stung his face. He lifted one hand to wipe his cheek, glove brushing the roughness of his beard. "You are Zulu?" he asked. Dot, she studied him, as if deciding how much of herself to spend on answering. "Yes," she said eventually. "That is the word you use. My people call it something longer." It would freeze on your tongue." He almost smiled despite everything. "What's your name?" he asked. Dot? She hesitated, chains clinking as she shifted her weight against the post. "Namvele," she said. The syllables rolled from her tongue with a quiet strength. "It means rain child." Her eyes flicked to the blank white world around them. "Not much use here." He tasted the name silently, then nodded. "I'm Eric," he said. "My name doesn't mean anything." He pointed with his chin at the chains. "These need to come off." Something flickered across her face, so brief he almost missed it. Hope, thin and dangerous. "You think you can break iron with that little axe?" she asked. "There's always a weak link," he said. "Weather does some of the work." He stepped closer, boots sinking almost to the laces. Up close he could see where the iron had already begun to crack from constant strain and freezing. A black line ran through one of the links near her left wrist. He set the axe head carefully against it, testing the angle. His heart had started to pound faster, this time not from the cold. "If they come back and find you here with me," he said quietly, "this will go badly." "For you," she said. "For both of us," he replied. Her eyes held his for a moment. He saw very clearly that she was not asking him for anything. She would live or die according to some inner measure that had nothing to do with his conscience. He was the one on the edge. "Then why are you still standing?" she asked softly. "Because I've seen too many men break and done nothing," he thought. "Because I've been a coward before. Because I can't walk away from someone chained like a dog and still call myself a man. Instead," he said, "because I don't want your bones under this snow." He raised the axe. The first strike rang through the hollow like a bell. Shock jarred up his arms, shoulders flaring. The chain shuddered, flakes of rust dropping into the snow like brown powder. Namvula didn't flinch. She watched the arc of his swing, the bite of steel, eyes steady. He hit it again, adjusting, letting the weight of the axe do most of the work. The cold had made the iron brittle. On the fourth blow, the link split with a sharp, clean sound, halves jumping apart, chain sagging. Her left hand came free. Dot. She inhaled sharply, like a diver breaking the surface. Blood flushed back into her fingers in painful color. She clenched and unclenched her hand slowly, then looked at him. "One more," she said. He moved around her, feeling the heat roll off her body despite the cold, the closeness of someone who existed in larger proportions than he was used to. He smelled sweat, old fear, and something stubborn beneath it, like green wood resisting fire. At her right wrist, the shackle had chewed deep. Skin was torn at the edges, dried blood cracked black. He swallowed, positioned the axe, and swung again. Sparks jumped once when metal struck metal wrong, tiny brief stars dying instantly in the air. On the third blow, the shackle gave. It snapped open, half still clinging to the chain, the other half hanging uselessly from the ring. Both her hands were free. He stepped back automatically, giving her space. Namvula rose slowly, pushing against the post with one palm, boots grinding into packed snow. As she straightened, he realized he had underestimated her height. She stood a full head and more above him, shoulders nearly as wide as the post. For a heartbeat, she simply breathed. She rolled her shoulders, the wool coat stretching tight over muscle. Iron collars still locked at her throat, but chains to her wrists now useless. The short length from collar to post remained. Holding her like a tethered dot, she looked down at him. "You missed one," she said quietly. He nodded, throat dry, and stepped around again. Up close, the collar seemed thicker, meant to stay. The ring that held it to the post was large, sunk deep into wood, gone gray with age. He set the axe there, fingers numb, and swung with everything he had left. The sound this time was duller, swallowed by the post. He struck again. On the sixth blow, when his arms had turned to lead, and his breath came harsh and ragged, the ring tore free of the wood. It didn't break. It ripped the post itself, taking a chunk with it. Nomvula staggered as the tension suddenly vanished. Then the last anchor of iron failed, and the whole assembly fell, chain, ring, and splintered wood crashing into the snow. She stood detached from the earth's leash for the first time in days. Eric lowered the axe, chest heaving. His hands shook, part exhaustion, part something else. Adrenaline, maybe, or the realization of what he had just done. She reached up and touched the collar, fingers grazing the cold metal. Her thumb pressed against the bolt without hope. It held. "This stays," she murmured. "For now." He stared at the broken chains in the snow, at the ruin of the post. The hollow seemed suddenly too quiet. "You should move," he said hoarsely, "before they come back." Slowly she turned in a full circle, taking in the ridges, the tree line, the distant suggestion of smoke from camp. Her gaze found the direction of the river, the road into town, the deeper forest. "Where is there to go?" she asked. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Every direction held danger. In town, men who had chained her would shout for the sheriff. On the river, loggers would see a runaway. In the forest, there was cold, hunger, and wolves. "You can't stay here," he said. "I will not," she replied. She stepped past him without warning. Snow creaked under her weight, boots leaving deeper prints than his. He moved aside instinctively, giving her the path. As she climbed the slope, her shoulders brushed low branches, knocking snow down in small avalanches. She did not look back at the rim. She paused. "For this," she said without turning, "I owe you something." "You don't," he said. "You owe them broken chains." Now she glanced back, eyes narrowing slightly, studying him from that height. "You freed a dangerous woman," she said. "You think they will not notice?" He knew they would. The foreman would see the smashed post, the cut chains, and his mind would leap to the one man out late with an axe. Eric could already hear the questions, feel the heavy hands on his coat, taste the sour threat of losing his job or his teeth. "Or something more. I'll manage," he said. She watched him another heartbeat. "No," she said softly. "You will pay. The snow always takes its price." He had no answer. Then she turned and walked into the trees, a great dark shape moving between trunks, swallowed gradually by shadow and falling flurries. In moments, only the sway of branches marked her passing. Eric stood alone in the hollow, surrounded by broken iron in the snow. That was when the cold realization finally settled in his chest like a stone. He had not just saved a life. He had placed a mark on his own. He looked down at the mangled chains again, then at his hands. One knuckle had split against the axe handle. Blood welled, bright and shocking against the white. Footsteps crunched behind him. He spun, axe lifting halfway before he stopped himself. Two men stood at the top of the opposite slope, silhouettes hard against the gray sky. One was thick through the middle, coat straining at the buttons, fur hat pulled low. The other was leaner, shoulders hunched, a rifle cradled easily in his arms. The big man laughed once, a short, pleased sound. "Well now," the foreman called down. "Looks like we got ourselves a hero." Eric's grip tightened on the axe without him deciding to move. The foreman started down the slope, snow squealing under his weight, each step a small avalanche around his boots. The thin man with the rifle followed more carefully, eyes never leaving Eric's hands. "Drop that axe," the rifleman said mildly. "No need for excitement." Eric lowered it slowly until the blade kissed the snow. He did not let go. The hollow seemed much smaller now. The smashed post, the broken chains, the deep holes where Namvula's knees had been. Snow swirled in lazy patterns around it all, trying to erase his work. The foreman reached the bottom and stopped, breathing a little hard. His cheeks were flushed red with cold and drink, beard flecked with ice. He looked from Eric to the broken iron, then at the ragged tracks leading up and out, disappearing into pines. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. The animal chewed through. He nudged a half chain with his boot. It clinked, heavy and stupid. Or maybe somebody brought it a sharper set of teeth. Eric kept his face still. "She broke it," he said. "Cold made it brittle. You know how cheap that iron was." The foreman smiled without humor. "You calling me cheap, Swede?" he asked. "I'm calling you practical," Eric said. "No one spends good chain on a punishment post." The rifleman shifted slightly, boots creaking. His eyes were pale, washed-out blue, the kind that never told much. He tilted his head like a man watching a card game turn. "The post didn't collapse on its own," he said. "Those cuts are clean, boss." The foreman turned his head, studying the shattered wood, the marks in it. He bent, grunted, ran a thick thumb along a groove left by the axe. "That your work, too?" he asked. "I came looking for the missing Mar," Eric said. His voice sounded flat to his own ears. "Found this place instead. Found the post already broken. Tracks going out." He shrugged once. "I figured someone else had changed their mind." The lie lay there between them. Thin and fragile Dot, the foreman, straightened, snowflakes clinging to the fur trim of his hat. "You think I don't know who's where in my camp?" he asked. "I sent you out, boy. You and that axe." His gaze slid to the deep, fresh prints leading away. "And now our little lessons walked off on 2 big feet." He took 2 slow steps toward Eric, boots grinding on broken links. The metal squealed under his weight. "That Zulu breaks another man's bones," he said. "That's on me. I can live with that. That Zulu kills a man, that's also on me. I can maybe live with that, too. But that Zulu runs off and causes trouble with no chain on her?" His eyes hardened. "That lands on my ledger. That I can't abide." "She was dying," Eric said before he could stop himself. "You left her here like a dog." "Dog's worth more," the foreman said easily. "Dog can haul. Dog listens." His face thickened with something meaner. "You getting tender-hearted, Eric? That what this is?" The wind gusted, tugging at coats, flinging snow into their faces. Eric squinted, the cold needling his eyes. "She broke a man's arm for beating a boy," he said. "You call that dangerous?" "I call that doing your job for you." The foreman's smile vanished. "Careful," he said. You're stepping close to a line. The rifleman shifted again, weight settling, the barrel angling just a fraction more toward Eric's middle. The movement was small, deliberate. Eric felt his shoulders tense. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at the foreman's eyes instead, the hard little lights in them. "Did you free her?" the foreman asked. Eric said nothing. Silence stretched. The foreman's gaze did not blink. The rifleman's finger rested loose along the trigger. Not on it, not yet. His breath plumed gently. "Answer the man," the rifleman murmured. "It's too cold to stand around weighing words." Eric knew if he lied harder now, they would taste it. They weren't smart, not exactly, but camp men had instincts for weakness. He swallowed, tongue thick. "I cut the chains," he said. "Yes," the foreman's jaw rolled side to side, teeth grinding once under his beard. "Why?" he asked. "Because I'm not a coward," Eric snapped. It came out sharper than he meant. "Because I've watched enough men beaten for sport to last me. Because I won't stand and smoke and laugh while someone freezes to death for your entertainment." The words hung there, white and harsh as the air. The rifleman let out a low, soft whistle. "Now that's a speech," he said. The foreman's face went very calm. "You calling your boss a coward, son?" he asked. Eric's pulse hammered so loud he could barely hear the wind. "I'm calling you wrong," he said. "On this, on her." "She broke Charlie's arm," the foreman said. "Charlie's my man. I can't run a camp where the oxen think they're teamsters. She broke his arm because he was whipping a boy who had already fallen," Eric said. "You know that." "That boy cost me 2 logs in the creek," the foreman replied. His voice stayed mild, like they argued over a tally sheet. "Charlie was teaching him the price of clumsiness. That's discipline. That's order. That's cruelty," Eric said. "Cruelty keeps 80 men in line when the pay wagon's late and the whiskey's cheap," the foreman snapped back. The calm slipped then, anger flaring through. "Cruelty keeps you from waking with a knife in your ribs every night. Don't preach at me about the way things ought to be. You ain't running this show." The wind dropped for a second, as if listening. "What now?" Eric asked quietly. The foreman looked him over slowly. "Now?" he said. "Now we go back to camp. We pretend we didn't lose a very valuable piece of fear out here. And you, my righteous little Swede, go fell trees and keep your mouth shut." His gaze sharpened. "And if that big dark giant shows her face again, if any more bones get broken that ain't mine to break, we all start with you." "You want me to help hunt her," Eric said. "I want you to keep your eyes open," the foreman said. "And understand something." He stepped closer until his breath touched Eric's face, sour with tobacco. "By cutting those chains, you took a debt. Not from her, from me. That debt sits on your shoulders now. You think on that tonight when the wind howls." He turned, snow crunching, and began up the slope, shoulders rolling with effort. The rifleman lingered a moment longer, studying Eric. There was no hate there, only a kind of tired interest, like a man watching storm clouds arrange themselves. "You're a fool," he said quietly. "A brave one, maybe. Still a fool." "Somebody had to do something," Eric said. The rifleman shrugged. "Plenty of somebodies died for less," he replied. "Come on, before your fingers fall off." Eric followed them up, each step heavier. In the trees, the foreman set a hard pace back toward camp, boots chewing the narrow path. No one spoke. The woods creaked and groaned in the cold, branches shedding occasional showers of powder dust. By the time the clearing opened ahead, the light had gone blue with early evening. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney in a steady column, spreading thin against the sky. Lanterns flickered in bunkhouse windows, promising warmth that never quite reached the bones. Men moved between buildings, shoulders hunched, voices low, the day's work sitting heavy on them. The sound of a cross-cut saw still drifted from the yard where a couple of stubborn souls finished a job. Under torchlight, they walked straight to the foreman's shack. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, and the sour heat of too many damp coats hung on pegs. A pot of coffee boiled on a small iron stove, the smell strong enough to wake the dead. The foreman dropped into his chair, wood creaking. The rifleman leaned his weapon against the wall. Eric remained standing. "Sit," the foreman said. "You make me nervous, looming around like that." Eric stayed where he was. "Suit yourself," the foreman muttered. He poured himself coffee, then thought better and poured a second tin cup, sliding it across the table. "Drink, you look like teeth already half done." Eric's fingers were numb enough to accept the heat gratefully. The metal burned his skin, but in a good way. He sipped, swallowed bitter fire, felt it spread. "So," the foreman said, "we got ourselves a loose storm. Big one, mean, smarter than half the men on my payroll." He tapped his cup with a dirty fingernail. "Might have been useful if she'd known her place." "She has a place," Eric said quietly. "It just isn't under your boot." The foreman chuckled. "You going to keep throwing those little lines at me? I might almost enjoy this," he said. "Let's talk clear. That woman goes into town, there'll be questions. There's folks that got opinions about savage women running loose. There's the sheriff who likes an excuse to look important. And there's Lawson from the company, who hates trouble worse than he hates paying men on time." "Lawson doesn't come out here," Eric said. "He don't need to," the foreman replied. "Word travels faster than sled teams. You think you're invisible, chopping your trees. You ain't. Nothing that threatens the company purse stays invisible." Eric set his cup down with a soft click. "You're saying this to scare me," he said. "To keep me quiet." "I'm saying this so you understand what you lit," the foreman said. "You ever seen a fire in dry slash? Starts with one spark. One man too proud to piss on it. Next thing you're digging through ash for bones." Eric thought of Namvula walking through the trees, that great dark shape between trunks. He imagined her stumbling into a trap line, or into some farmer's yard, or into a town alley with boys who thought their courage grew with each mouthful of drink. His jaw clenched. "She won't go to town," he said. "She's not stupid." "That's the problem," the foreman said. "She'll go where she thinks they can't find her. And who knows the woods best around here?" He jabbed a finger at Eric. You and men like you. They'll come asking. They'll say, 'Eric, you've been out there, you've seen things.' Where would a scared, angry giant go?" "She's not scared," Eric said. "Everyone's scared," the rifleman said from the corner. "Just different things." The foreman nodded toward him. "You think about that, Swede," he said. "When they come asking, you're going to lie again?" Eric looked at the floorboards. A knot in the wood had split under some long-ago boot heel, leaving a small crater. "I don't know," he said. "That's honest," the foreman mused. "Maybe that'll save you." Maybe it won't. He drained his coffee, slammed the cup down. For now, you keep your head low. You hear talk of big footprints where they shouldn't be. You tell me first. Not your bunkmates, me. What will you do if you find her? Eric asked. The foreman smiled, slow and mean. Chain her higher, he said. Somewhere the snow don't drift so kind. Or maybe send word to town. Let them decide how they like their savages served. The coffee turned to stone in Eric's stomach. He left the shack with his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Outside. The camp swallowed him quickly. Men moved between the cookhouse and bunkhouse, boots tracking slush, voices low and rough with fatigue. Someone laughed too loudly near the woodpile, the sound brittle. The sky had gone from gray to steel, the first thin flakes beginning to fall again, catching an lamplight. Eric ate in silence, spooning stew that tasted of salt and barely anything else. The long bunkhouse table buzzed with talk about a jam on the river, about a woman in town, about a cracked sled runner. No one mentioned the punishment post. Either they didn't know or they pretended not to. In the far corner, a couple of men played cards with the desperate intensity of those who needed money for more than fun. The stove roared, heat pulling sweat from faces, steam from drying socks. The air smelled of smoke, wet wool, and men who had worked too hard. When the lanterns were lowered and the talk thinned, Eric climbed into his bunk, boots tucked under the edge, blanket pulled up. The board beneath his mattress creaked the same way. It always did. Sleep did not come. He lay staring at the underside of the bunk above, tracing the knots in the wood, listening to the symphony of a camp at rest snores, mutters, the occasional cough, the deep, settling sighs of exhausted bodies. Outside, the wind began to rise, moaning around corners, shaking the bunkhouse walls. His mind kept walking the path through the trees, back to the hollow, back to the broken chains. It followed Namvula into the dark, imagined every sound as a branch snapping under her weight, every gust as her breath. At some point, he did doze. He woke to shouting. It tore through the bunkhouse, like a thrown log through rotten boards. Men jerked up in their bunks, blankets flying, curses thick in the air. The door slammed open, wind and snow barreling in on the shoulders of a man with no coat and wild eyes. "Wake up," he yelled. "Wake the hell up, you sleepers." It was Tom from the river crew, hair sticking up, socks half on. "What?" Someone groaned. "What's burning?" "Not what," Tom gasped. "Who?" Behind him, over the rising wind, faint but clear, came another sound from the dark outside. A scream. Not fear, rage. Eric's blood ran cold before the rest of him caught up. He was out of his bunk before he knew he had moved. The floor was an ice sheet under bare feet, boards burning his soles with cold. Men swore and fumbled for boots, for coats. Someone knocked over a lantern. It swung wildly on its hook, throwing shadows like panicked birds across the walls. Another scream cut through the night. Closer this time. More voices tangled with its shouts, the hard bark of orders. Someone yelling for a gun. Eric dragged on his pants, jammed his feet into damp boots, grabbed his coat one-handed. His fingers shook as he fought the buttons. Around him, the bunkhouse erupted into a stumbling army of half-dressed men. "What is it?" Someone cried. "What's out there? Bear?" said another, already reaching for an axe. Tom's eyes were big and white against his dirty face. Not a bear, he panted. Her, the giant. She's in camp. The words hit Eric like a fist to the chest. He pushed past bodies, shoving through the narrow aisle between bunks. The door yawned at the far end, pouring in cold and snow and noise. He stepped out into it, and the wind slapped him awake fully. Snow came sideways in fine, stinging sheets. The world beyond the bunkhouse was a blur of gray and yellow lamplight smearing across swirling flurries, men's shapes flickering in and out of sight. The camp, usually so solid and rough, seemed suddenly made of smoke and movement. He heard wood splinter. "Stay back," someone shouted. "For gods," the voice cut off in a choked grunt. Eric ran toward the sound. His boots slipped on ice-slick paths, caught in ruts, skidded over hidden roots. Lanterns swung from hooks on the cookhouse and tool shed, their circles of light rocking crazily. Men clustered in loose groups, drawn by fear and curiosity, but held at a distance by something stronger. In the center of the yard, near the foreman's shack, the crowd broke slightly. Through the gap, Eric saw her. Namvula stood by the woodpile. She looked larger in motion than she had chained. Her coat flared with each breath, dark against flung snow, the iron collar at her throat a cold ring of moonlight. Her hair had come loose, whipping around her face. The chains that had once bound her wrists now hung from her hands. Like beaten iron snakes dot at her feet lay a man, Charlie. The one whose arm she had broken before lay twisted in the snow. His good arm bent at a wrong angle now, too. His face was pale under the lantern light, mouth open, teeth bloody. His eyes rolled, unfocused. She had not killed him. Not yet. Around her, men formed a ragged circle, axes and peavies, and shovels raised uncertainly. The rifleman from earlier hail. Eric remembered suddenly stood a little off to one side, his gun held but not lifted. Expression taut, but the foreman was not in sight. "Back away from him," a voice shouted, strained high with fear. "Back off, you hear me?" Namvula's head turned slowly toward the sound. Her chest heaved, fogging the air. Snow clung to her lashes, melted in streaks down her cheeks. Her eyes were dark pits in that storm light. He raised his hand, she said, voice carrying over the wind. Again, to another boy. Eric's gaze flicked to the cookhouse door. In its shadow, half hidden behind an older logger's bulk, a skinny figure huddled. Barely more than a child, shoulders shaking, face streaked with wet. The boy Namvula had spoken of before, or another just like him. They all blurred together after a while. He didn't mean nothing. One of Charlie's friends cried, knuckles white on his axe. He was just teaching. "That's how it's done. That's how you break men," Namvula said. "Under whips and boots? I have seen enough breaking." She stepped away from Charlie's body. The chains in her fists dragged furrows through the snow. "Where is the fat one?" She called. "The one who laughs while men bleed." The camp went quiet in a way Eric had never heard. Even the wind seemed to duck its head. The foreman's shack door opened. He stepped out slowly, coat buttoned tight, hat pulled low. His cheeks were flushed, but not from drink this time. He held his hands away from his body, palms empty and visible. "Well now," he called, voice trying for calm. "You made good time. Thought it might take you longer to come say hello." Namvula turned toward him fully. The men between them shifted, some stumbling aside without meaning to. The space opened like an eye. Eric found himself near its edge, breath shallow, hands empty. He had grabbed no axe, no saw. You chained me in the snow, Namvula said. You called me animal. You laughed when I could not lift my hands. I called you dangerous, the foreman corrected. Which you are. Look at poor Charlie. He gestured lazily with his chin. A man ought to be able to keep order without worrying his arm will snap in two. Charlie groaned weakly in the drift. You left me to die, she said. I left you to think, the foreman snapped. To understand how things work here. I would have brought you in when you learned to keep your hands to yourself. The lie sat there, ugly and obvious. Namvula's lip curled. You would have found a feeble woman, she said. Or dead one. Easier to look in eyes when the spirit is gone. Maybe, the foreman said. What's done is done. And now you're here, stomping around my yard. You broke a second arm, scared my boys, and you're waving those chains like you don't want to live. His gaze flicked briefly toward Hal. I'd say we got business. Hale's hands tightened on the rifle. Snow stung Eric's cheeks. Melted, ran cold tracks down his neck. Every breath hurt. Let her walk out, Eric said suddenly. Heads turned. A few men saw it was him speaking and stepped farther away, as if contagion followed his words. Stay out of this. Swede, the foreman snarled. You do that, Eric said, voice steady despite the tremor in his legs. You make this camp something worse than it already is. You chain a woman in the snow, she comes back and breaks more bones. You shoot her in front of us all? Nobody forgets that, ever. Who asked you? Someone muttered. Namvula glanced at Eric, a brief, unreadable look. Snow clung to the iron at her throat, to the lashes at the corners of her eyes. Shut him up, another man hissed. He's the reason she's here. The foreman's gaze cut back and forth between them, a wolf weighing which throat to take first. You hear that? He said to Namvula. Man says you can just walk. You want to walk, Zulu? Snow's deep. Wolves are hungry. Town's full of men who'd love a story like you to hang over their stoves. But sure, we can let you stroll. Namvula's shoulders rose and fell, a slow, massive movement. Walk where you will not chase? She asked. The foreman smiled thinly. You think I got time to chase every stray? He said. You step off my land, you're someone else's problem. Long as you don't come limping back here, dragging more trouble. It wasn't exactly a lie. He meant it the way a man meant. He wouldn't chase a rabbit off his porch if a bear was already in his yard. There would be other dangers. Boss, Holly said softly. You sure about that? The foreman flicked him an irritated glance. You want to put a bullet in her and answer questions downriver? He snapped. You want Lawson sniffing around, asking why we're wasting lead on company property? His voice turned mocking. Maybe he'll pat you on the head for being such a good little guard dog. Hale's jaw clenched. Company already paid for her passage, the foreman continued. We lose her, that's one thing. We kill her, that's another. Paper likes clean stories. Runaway savage gets lost in the woods? That they can write? Shot savage in the yard? That's messy. Namvula listened, chains hanging still now at her sides. Snow gathered on her shoulders, melting in patches where her heat fought it off. You talk of me like tree or mule, she said slowly. Paid for. Kept or broken. That's how it is, the foreman said. You don't like it. You shouldn't have lost your war. Something moved through the men then. A ripple of shame, discomfort, anger, hard to say. Anyone who had ever lost anything to a bigger hand felt it. Nomvula's fingers tightened on the iron length. I did not lose, she said very quietly. I was taken. Her eyes met Eric's briefly. He saw then the line he had stepped over when he cut those chains. There was no going back to a simpler world. Let me offer you a trade, the foreman said suddenly, spreading his hands like a man at a market stall. You walk now. You take your temper and your big fists, and you go freeze or make trouble for some other fool. In return, you leave my men alone. You don't come back. You don't break any more bones on my watch. You don't take that iron and wrap it around anyone's neck here. Deal? She stared at him. What if I say no? She asked Dot. His jaw shifted. Then I tell Hal to put one in your leg, and we see how fast you limp in snow that deep, he said. And if that doesn't stop you, he puts one higher. You might drag me down with you, girl, but I promise I'll make it cost you every step. Hale's face did not change, but his knuckles whitened on the rifle. Men held their breath. The whole camp balanced on that moment like a log on a jam. Nomvula looked around slowly. At the ring of faces, some afraid, some angry, some already sorry. At the boy crouched near the cookhouse, eyes wide, hand pressed to a welt on his back. At Eric, standing with empty hands and jaw clenched tight. You cannot free me, she said to the foreman. You can only unchain what you think you own. I don't care what words you use, he said. I just care where you stand when the sun comes up. Her attention shifted back to Eric. You cut the chains, she said. And now your world cracks. Maybe it needed to, he said. A corner of her mouth twitched. Almost not there. You made a mistake, she said. You thought freeing me would wash your hands clean. It only covered them with more blood. Mine, the boys, the men who will come with guns. Chasing a story now bigger than their courage. He swallowed. I know, he said. She nodded once. Good, she said. Then you understand the cost. Without another word, she turned Dot. No one tried to stop her. She walked through the ring, chains dragging, boots sinking deep. Men stumbled back to make way, eyes fixed on the iron, on her shoulders, on anything but her face. Only the boy met her gaze fully. She paused a heartbeat beside him. Stand when they hit you, she said softly, or fall and stay down. But don't say yes when everything in you says no. Then she moved on Dot. She passed within arm's reach of Eric. The heat of her, the sheer physical presence, almost made him flinch. Her eyes flicked over him once, leaving something behind, blame, maybe, or a rough gratitude twisted with resentment. It was hard to name. He opened his mouth. Nomvula, he said. She didn't stop. Where will you go? He managed. Where the trees are thicker than fear, she said. Where men like him forget to look. She jerked her chin toward the black wall of forest beyond the yard. Snow swallowed her ankles, then her shins, then half her boots as she stepped off the beaten paths. The storm tried to hide her, but it couldn't quite yet. That size could not disappear quickly. The foreman watched her go, jaw working, eyes narrowed. His fingers tapped once against his thigh, counting something only he understood. Hall did not lift the rifle. When she reached the tree line, Nomvula turned one last time. The snow will take its price, she called back. On me. On you. On all of this. Her arm swept, indicating the camp, the men, the smoke curling upward. Remember that when the wolves sing, she added, some of those voices will be your own. Then she vanished into the dark between trunks, a shadow swallowed by deeper shadow. For a long moment, no one moved. Eric's heart hammered so hard his chest ached. He tasted iron on his tongue. He had bitten his lip without noticing. The foreman inhaled, slow and deliberate. Show's over, he said. Get back to your bunks, you vultures. Anyone speaks her name after tonight answers to me. The men dispersed in clumps and trickles, muttering, glancing over shoulders, pulling coats tight. The boy by the cookhouse slipped inside like a ghost. The lantern steadied as the wind eased for a breath. Hal walked past Eric, rifle over his shoulder. You should have let her die in that hollow, he said quietly. She was already dead there, Eric replied, just as low. We were just watching it happen. Hale's eyes flicked to him, something like respect and pity tangled together. Maybe, he said. But dead things don't walk back into camp and tear the world open. He moved on. Eric stood alone for a moment in the trampled snow, breath steaming, fingers numb. Above him the sky was a featureless lid of gray. The trees at the edge of the clearing loomed, hiding whatever moved inside. He had freed her. He had thought in some naive corner of himself that the hardest part would be breaking the iron, that once the chains fell, something like justice would follow. Not clean, not perfect, but better. Now he realized the iron had been the easiest part. The real weight lay on everything after. He turned back toward the bunkhouse, slowly, each step heavy. The snow seemed deeper than before. The wind had found a new note in its song. It sounded to his ears like distant laughter and distant grief, braided so tightly they were impossible to tell apart. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and comment what country you're watching from. See you in the next one.